Yeah, though Jen and I have to leave, I saw all of these presentations last night. They're phenomenal with amazing implications for the future. So again, I just want to do on all the work that you've done, on your brilliance, and what you've brought to our organization into the future, what we'll be able to do for kids. You guys are phenomenal. And thank you, Connie, for bringing us these brilliant change agents every year. They're like one of my favorite things. People. One of my favorite parts of the model. All right. Bye, guys. See you later. And I'll be back. Yep. All right.
Hi everyone. We are going to present to you our insights on operations and data analytics at SummerCollab this year. So I'm Preeti Krishnamani. I'm a rising senior at the Charter School of Wilmington, and I'm a Bank of America student leader. So I really have to thank Connie and SummerCollab for investing in all of us and helping us really learn about a nonprofit and sort of be agents of change from the get-go. So at SummerCollab, we have two operations managers who basically manage the overall supply management team. And when I came into SummerCollab, I found, or one of the operations managers was actually leaving unexpectedly. So I found myself filling his place and taking on a role of providing critical support to our operations team. And in the first few weeks, which are probably the most busiest time of year for supply management, me and Matt had to really help roll out these different supply systems and train these operations specialists at the various sites. So I was really interested in operations from the very beginning. And for my project, I was really interested in bringing data-driven insights on SummerCollab operations in two different aspects, in supply management and also in increasing the effectiveness of the operations specialist role through data.
And my name is Matthew Santos. I'm a rising sophomore at Emory University. And so a little bit of background. Last year, I was in OS. So I got an insight into how that role works. And then, so this summer, I decided to come on as the supply and operations specialist manager. So I make sure that all the camps have the supplies they need to run the curriculum. And I make sure that the OSs are doing their tasks effectively. And so just a little bit of a quick intro to SummerCollab's kind of leadership model. So you have the camp director who works at the community agencies and who are in charge of the vision of the camp and the overall operations of the camp. You have the program coaches who work really close with the camp directors and serve as a liaison between the community agencies and Collab and provide sort of a consultancy type of role to make sure that curriculum is run well. And then you have the program dean at each site, and so these people, they ensure that the curriculum is run effectively and tailored to how the site functions. And you have the reading specialist, reading core, who works on literacy and reading intervention at the sites, behavioral specialists, behavior deans who work at the sites managing behavior aspects, and TCs and counselors who really are the ones who really roll out the curriculum and teach it to the kids and make sure they're engaging in it. And then the operations specialists, we have pretty much at least one at every site, and this is the role that we're going to expand upon today, and really how we can better use their time and make their role even more effective.
So now that we've set the basis for our model, we have something called a field guide, which sort of governs our goals and our expectations for each season. So this is part of the supply system and the goals that we had set ahead of time for the spring and the summer seasons of supply management. Right now, we're only going to focus on the evaluation, data collection, 360 step backs, and data analysis pieces for the purpose of our presentation. And I found that throughout the summer, while I was working in the area of supply management, we were missing some critical pieces that we had expected. Things like collecting data in the operations side, whether it comes to expenses or inventory, and taking a step back to evaluate the staff's role on the operations side to see what can be done better and how can we better make use of this investment in operations staff. So to do that, we were looking through all of the rubrics we had to assess reading core, literacy staff, and we found that there was a lack of operations accountability. And that's why Matt and I decided to create a supply management rubric.
So how that rubric is broken down is we have the execution piece, the gift card system, which we'll explain a little bit later, the sustainability of the inventory, and the quality and functionality of materials.
So once we created this rubric, as you can see here, like we have each of the components that are listed, and all of the program deans and operations specialists that we sent this out to at each of our 12 member camps would respond and evaluate on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 represents the poorest efficiency in that component, and 5 represents the most efficiency and the best performance in that area. So after we sent out these rubrics, we had a 50% respondency rate, which is pretty good for the first year of using this accountability system from West End, Dagsboro, Hilltop, Shortledge, Laurel, and Brown.
But was it just one? How was that rolled out, and what was the kind of follow-up protocol?
Yeah, so we basically emailed this rubric out with instructions, a set of instructions, and to the operations specialists and the program deans, and we followed up to make sure that they were completing this and sending it back to us in a timely manner. What was also great was that we had a comments section in the supply management rubric, and earlier on we didn't expect many detailed comments, but we ended up getting paragraphs and paragraphs of feedback, which is amazing because now we have concrete evidence for how we can improve operations in the future. So these are the insights that we had collected from analyzing the scores on the rubric. So as you can see, the execution and the gift card system pieces were rated pretty high, where execution basically refers to the delivery of supplies to each of these classrooms in a timely fashion. And the gift card system, which is the way that the operations specialists purchase these supplies throughout the summer. So on average, member camps each spent about $500 on supplies using the gift cards, which is pretty good because that means that in total, member camps would have spent $6,000 on their own on supplies over the summer. Now, the lowest rated components were sustainability of inventory, which relates to how fast these supplies were running out and how fast shortages and surpluses were occurring on sites. And also the quality and functionality of materials. So that refers to how effective these supplies that were required with the curriculum were in lessons when put into action. So we wanted to find a way to improve that because with regard to quantity and quality, we found that 50% of the supplies that curriculum requested were actually not being used, which immediately creates huge surpluses that are hard to really get rid of. So focusing on quality and functionality of materials, we had one driving question. How do we revise curriculum to make the supplies more realistic? And when I say realistic, I mean to find in the market and purchase in bulk quantities.
And so I think this could be a really big piece to how we sort of prep for the summer. I was thinking that we can have like an operations manager and a teacher counselor to kind of sit down with curriculum writers and sort of like share their ideas and really create a discussion. Like the biggest problems concerning supplies from my past 2 experience have been like the supplies are either like so overpriced or the quantity requested on the sheets are like way more than what's needed. And so that's why I think that this conversation would really help on finding like the cheapest supplies, the supplies that will be used most effectively, and determining a right amount of supply. And overall, it will aid in creating a more engaging and more impactful curriculum for the campers, especially from talking with like teacher counselors. Some people say that like sometimes it can be a little bit too like they run through it a little bit quickly, So it'd be good to have it more like, impactful or more engaging in that sense.
Also, a lot of the TCs take a lot of creative freedom, which is great, to modify the curriculum to make it more engaging and to be more resourceful with the materials. So it would be great to get that feedback ahead of time in this curriculum supply fashion.
And so we wanted to also in the supply side, we kind of wanted to create a proposal of how we should better deal with our purchasing, our supply processes, and determining whether centralized buying, which is like purchasing from HQ, versus decentralized purchasing, which is when the OS is run, which is kind of find that fine line where each piece would work. And so just to explain what we did this summer, me and the operations manager who worked earlier, we together bought the first 2 weeks of curriculum supplies for the summer. We packed them in boxes and then sent them to the camps. And then, so that kind of represents a more centralized approach to it. And then for the rest of the weeks, we did a more decentralized approach where each campsite had about $500 in gift cards, and the OSs at those sites would make the purchases to ensure that their camps were supplied. And so what we instead propose is we would like that HQ orders like standard supplies like throughout the year. So what I mean by standard supplies is that there's a lot of supplies like pencils, pens, like flashcards, like items that are used like every single year. So like next summer, we're definitely gonna need those supplies. So and when me and my colleague were making purchases, it was like early in the summer. It wasn't. It was perhaps not. It wasn't the best time to purchase them because like supplies, they were just more expensive during those months.
So let me quickly jump in.
Yeah.
Come August, we're in August now, right? And this is back to school shopping time. And I think that this is a great time when we should capitalize on to get a lot of these school supplies in stock. So come September and throughout September and August, we should really be purchasing a lot of these big supplies like pencils, construction paper, and continuing to purchase them online in batches from a centralized perspective.
Yeah, and then and what I'm doing right now too is sort of managing the inventory in our basement, in our storage area, and really trying to create more of like a warehouse system. So we can buy the supplies now and then like hopefully store in the basement for use in future summers. And then so once we buy those sort of more standard supplies, once the curriculum is finished, then we can start ordering like the variant supplies, the supplies that sort of vary from summer to summer, and then start making those purchases. And then come June, when camp rolls around, then we can start packing. We recommend packing boxes for maybe like 1 week, and then having, in addition to that, all these standard supplies for the rest of the summer. And so then for the weeks 2 through 6, then the OSs will be just focused more on ordering sort of like the variant supplies, and it'll save us a lot of time for shopping. It'll save them a lot of time to do like they want to do like math intervention, or they're going to work on more data stuff.
So we talked about these standard supplies, right? How are we going to minimize our expenses and the amount we spend on the supplies that we use the most? So that's why Matt and I set out to create a supply database, which this is a part of that database you see over here, and it lists the name of the supply, the unit price, the number of units in that purchase order or the bulk, and the source that you can purchase it from. So both Matt and I went through the internet, went through all of these different markets, and we tried to find the lowest unit price for each of these items so we could get the best deal and cut the most expenses. And it ended up that we were able to significantly lower the supply costs by 38% if we do roll out the system. So how did we get to 38%? Initially, the cost per camper for one course was $2.56 for a class calculated from a class of 25 students for one standard course. So using that same metric, we were able to do a few calculations, and arrive at the number of $1.58 per camper using our supply database system. Now this saves almost $1 spent on each camper, which is amazing. In addition, this would also avert a lot of the emergency shopping trips that operations specialists have to make throughout the summer to purchase like some of these bulk supplies like pencils, construction paper, etc. So revisiting the role of the operations specialists, the role of the OS is like a dual one. So they're of course very responsible for supply management, planning supply systems, and making sure they get executed in the most efficient manner. But another part of their role and their responsibilities is data tracking. And that was something that we didn't see a lot of the OSs doing this year, maybe because they weren't equipped with the tools ahead of time and enough training and accountability to make sure that they were able to do that effectively. So that's why we wanted to create a system of accountability for operations specialists by creating this operations specialist rubric. So this is actually different from the supply management rubric that we talked about earlier, but it's in a similar format. Instead, the program deans will evaluate operations specialists on 4 different aspects. Organization, like organizing supplies, taking inventory regularly, proactively and making intelligent purchases, and also managing the time that they have on site to plan supply systems and give the best support to camps. So this is one of the rubrics, one of the parts of the rubrics that we have shown over here. And as you can see, it's the same sort of a format where 1 represents the poorest efficiency and 5 represents the best performance in that component. And for this rubric that we sent out to all of the program deans at the sites, we had a 33% respondency rate. So 4 of our sites, Hilltop, Laurel, Brown, and Dagsboro, had come back with us with this feedback and these evaluations.
And so, yeah, this is the rubric, and as you can see, like they scored really high in organization and taking inventory, and whereas there can be improvements made with intelligent purchasing and like time management.
So if you look at proactive intelligent purchasing, what we're basically referring to is OSs being able to purchase these supplies ahead of time before the lessons actually start, and also being intelligent about the purchases they make. For example, if you have like a certain lesson that requires 25 pencils, 1 for each of these students, and then the same another lesson on the same day, which also requires 25 pencils. Some of these OSs we found were actually repurchasing those pencils. So that's something where OSs can use better decision making and critical thinking to improve their decision making and cut costs for us. Also, in terms of time management, most of the OSs were being pretty efficient and effective with their time, putting it into providing the best support to camp. But there were some OSs that had extra time on camp that they were using for their personal work. And instead, that time can be dedicated to this task of data analysis. So we want to use data and our goal to collect data metrics to advance the role of the operations specialists. So this drove us to the question, what operations metrics can operations specialists collect and analyze for us? So there are 3 key data metrics that we would like operations specialists to be responsible for analyzing next year. So the first is expenses. So operations specialists are responsible for this gift card system. But the problem is these receipts and these expenses aren't being accounted for in the best and most standardized way. So if we actually created a tracking platform on Excel that if we train the OSs and we provide it to them ahead of time, and then they can actually use it and be very consistent and bring that data back to us to help us make intelligent decisions throughout the summer about how we're purchasing. Next is inventory. So we also created a similar tool to the expenses tracker for operations specialists to use to make their job of tracking inventory easier. Finally, tracking attendance is very important. I know it seems like a very sort of a something that's like an underlying responsibility that the camp should have, But there is a key metric that we can collect from tracking attendance. That's retention rates. So one of the things that Collab can look at in the future to improve the impact and grow their impact on students is seeing how many kids are actually staying in the camps. Are there any kids that are leaving halfway through the summer, and why is happening? We can start to ask better questions once we track these retention rates. And with that additional time that OSs have on site, they can do a better job of analyzing attendance data to calculate these retention rates for us.
And so I know like last summer we had weekly meetings with the OSs and the OS managers, and I think for next summer it'd be worth looking into to like reincorporate those meetings. I think it's really important to sort of get everybody, all the OSs on a centralized location, get them on the same page on a lot of different things. We were thinking like Fridays would be good, or even honestly, even like like a Thursday afternoon for like 1 or 2 hours just here or like in there or something. It'd be really good just to be able to touch base with everybody at the time, talk about operations as a whole. So to troubleshoot operations to mitigate problems across all sites. Kind of enforcing data and training sessions kind of go hand in hand. It's really we sent some data sheets to them, but oftentimes it can be hard to sort of explain it to them, and it'd be good to get everybody a centralized location just so it can be just like one run through of how to track data and what data metrics we would like to track. And again, to present expenses and retention rate data, we can have like the OS is kind of while some of those data have to track, it'd be good to like sort of present it to us in like a better way. And then a supply swap where like if a camp has supplies that they use in the previous weeks but they don't need anymore, and there's another site that does need it, that would be a good time to swap the supplies so we don't have to spend money, extra money on extra supplies.
So in our time at SummerCollab, we were able to gather a lot of insights after we learned supply systems, supply management. And part of that is making our supply systems more efficient and also enriching the role of the operations specialists and other operations staff. So some things that we can do going into the next year are aligning on the curriculum materials so that we create realistic quality and realistic quantity of the materials used in curriculum. Streamlining our purchase ordering process by following some sort of a standard timeline, like the one we suggested. Making sure that OSs are equipped with the skills and the experience needed to track certain data metrics like expenses, inventory, and attendance, and also bringing back these weekly operations specialist meetings to create a better line of communication and make sure that we're able to bring feedback and put it right back into the system. Thank you so much for your time. Any questions or comments?
Okay. So does every camp get the same amount of money in the gift cards?
Yeah.
Initially, yes.
Okay. Then how come you guys can't like make it so that camps with smaller groups of people get less money and camps with larger groups of people get more money?
Actually, we can. So something that we did this year was when we were issuing like second gift cards or certain gift cards to like big sites like Frame Boys and Girls Clubs, we actually loaded the gift cards with like $700 instead of $500. So they had a bigger budget for their bigger class of students.
Because one thing, since they get the $500 gift cards, and you said the average spend is about $500, there's something there. They know they have $500, so they're gonna spend it. I mean, it might be interesting. I think all this is great, is having some kind of incentives for these folks, which could be anything, just like being a shout out if you could do whatever it happens to be, on who's got all these things are very specific, who's done the best jobs on streamlining, on getting curriculum from other groups and back. And I also think that all this will depend on is the training up front, because it seemed like this year the big miss for the OSs was a specialized training, just for them to really which I know, just what happened, but, so that they knew exactly what they were doing coming in, especially for the new ones, because I think a lot of them were just thrown into it and completely blind as to what's going on.
Definitely. I think that's a great idea, like bringing back that incentive factor of like the weekly meetings.
Another thing I think we need to take into account is this, the camps do have some supplies. So I know this year, for instance, we ended up ordering some things that are standard issue, like scissors. Like I think we really need to have a process for inventorying camp supplies, and some of those reusable resources, and making sure we're maximizing what's already there and minimizing what we're, our additional spend. And of course, what's left over for this year. I really want to reduce duplication.
And I think that's right, especially, I think the OSs get paid well. So bringing them in, say, a week early to get all this up and running, or even way earlier to do some of the supply management. But it seemed like this year, all of a sudden, they were sort of thrown in that last, there was a Sunday where all of a sudden you've got all these people scrambling to pull together supplies for the campus that it's on Monday. And that's never a good way to do anything, as you all pointed out. So I think as much as we can get in with lead time to make sure we're not bringing in stuff that we don't need, and that we're, maximizing what we have from last year.
I like their idea about doing the 2 week supply, first 2 week supply centrally. So the OSs can kind of get up to speed in those first 2 weeks and get the wheels on them. I thought that was great. One other thought I had was having a shared worksheet, like Google Sheets or something like that, so people can see dynamically where the supplies are in the inventory and where they might steal them from.
I will get into
As they try to save things, and I apologize for that.
No, you're fine.
I was
But that's
blacked
actually
out of
something that
here.
we tried this year. The only problem was, so we did create an inventory tracker that all the sites technically had access to looking at. But the problem was we didn't set the expectations or frame it right at the very beginning during the trainings, as we said, which is something that now that we know, now that we have those tools, we can do that for next year.
Totally owned, like it came, like this happened late. There were a lot of things that got rolled out this year, and per Jocelyn's point, like we were not as far ahead of the game on OSs as we should have been. So now that some of those other big pieces are in place a little bit more, i.e. 5 Tyler's camps, we'll have a little bit more internal capacity to be ahead of some of these other pieces. I have one more question. So I'm curious as to the balance, right? So you propose centralization coupled with gift cards. Like, do you envision it basically going the same way? We centralize plus gift card. Is that the ideal mix?
Yeah, I think it would definitely have to be a mix. I think, but I think it'll reduce. So we start buying sort of like the standard supplies, stuff like school supplies, stuff that are cheap now. So then we can purchase that ahead of time, and then it'll also reduce the amount of time that the OSs have to go out shopping, and that way we can also reduce instead of $500, maybe we give them $300 for each camp.
Because if you what we planned is when we set the sites up with supplies, we'd set them up with all of the bulk supplies that they need for the whole of camp, which means that minimizes the amount of expenses they're gonna have. So we could also cut down gift card expenses in that way.
I think it's a combination of all of their points, because going into the category, proper orientation and training for the specialists, definitely. But then going into those camps, because some people just don't use their resources as wisely as they should or could. And so just going into each of those camps a couple weeks before and just literally going and looking around to see what it is they have, rather than just saying, tell us what you need. Let's see what you really have. And then at the end of camp, okay, this is what we gave you initially. What do you have? So a combination of things. Great presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, one other, I know you guys want to wrap up, but one other thing. So I've been here from the very beginning of this. So just do not underestimate what it's like to actually have one centralized place for supplies. We did that the first year. I don't think anybody was here. It was a nightmare that I still have nightmares about. Okay, we had like this room was to the ceiling with stuff, and there was no system to actually get it broken down and put into places. And we spent, all of us, we spent weeks and countless hours, and we had all sorts of spaces all over this building. It was a sheer nightmare. It's very easy to avoid that, but I'm telling you, do not think you just order in, 50,000 pencils and 3,000 marbles and 12,000 hula hoops, and it's all going to come together for all these different camps.
Yeah.
Because we only had 5 camps or 3 camps.
Yeah.
3 or 5 the first year, and it was a disaster. And that's why it went separated, because we couldn't deal with that again.
Yeah, it's like kind of like what I'm working on like the next week or so is that like I'm having like some OSs come in and our basement storage room. We're gonna like it's kind of like just it's basically like a lot of like years of summer supplies just shoved in there. But what we're hoping to do is really clear it out. We're gonna like get shelving in there, and then we're gonna organize all the supplies, and really we're gonna create like a sheet and take like inventory of like what everything is in there. So hopefully it'll be somewhat more organized in that aspect, and you can do it that way. So yeah, that
That's
was
just when the boxes start to come in from Amazon. You might want to see if you can get an Amazon warehouse manager volunteer.
Well, it's interesting you said like Jocelyn, because what I was thinking, what the great thing about this from an inventory and expense perspective is you came up with that cost per camper, right? I'm not sure if that's already existing or not, but there's this baseline now where you can go up or down from that. And then if the management team decides, hey, let's look at vendors, do a request for proposal on the supply piece, and have the OSs focus more on the academics, like it allows for decisions like that to be considered. So you kind of set the stage for that. Whether or not it changes, it may or may not, but really, really great work on the data side.